If I had to start watercolors all over again in 2026, then these are the top 5 things I would do differently. Just these 5 small shifts is going to help you see progress quicker and save you from a lot of frustration as well. And out of these 5 things, there's one thing that you may find annoying or little intimidating actually, but that's one of the changes that helped me immensely. So I'm going to talk about not just starting but also seeing progress as a beginner. How do you go to the next level and not stay at this beginner stage forever? So let's get right into it. Starting with the most important tip that I have for you is to start small but don't stay small. And when I talk about small, I talk about the watercolor paper size. So I do recommend students to start on a smaller size of paper. So I'll show you this was A5 size, my very first sketchbook that I had used, and I had a bigger sketchbook before this and it was a bit intimidating and I was probably intimidated by the size and I didn't know what to paint on such a big paper. So I actually recommend you to start on a smaller size paper. But if you want to see progress, which is the key element here, don't keep painting on this A4 size paper, A5 size paper, sorry. If you want to see progress, you want to move up a bit and go to an A4 size paper. I think that is the most standard size, which has enough space for you to explore, create bigger, bolder strokes. And I started seeing progress only when I moved from A5 to A4. Initially, it was intimidating to have such a big paper, but once you start painting, once you are in regular practice, you will see that you actually get better when you move to a bigger size paper. The next tip I have for you, which may be a bit controversial, is move away from pan colors. I know a lot of people and a lot of artists use pan colors and they create beautiful art, but personally I feel like I started creating better art which didn't look amateur. Maybe because my pan colors were not of good quality, but when I started using tube colors, I started seeing more progress. So I have my very first set with me. Actually, it's not the very first set, but one of the first sets. This is Winsor & Newton pan that I used to use. I think as a beginner it was pretty good and yeah, it served the purpose, but I feel like the colors in the pans sometimes are harder and you need to really activate it a lot to get a good amount of pigment on your brush. However, the tube paints are a little bit softer comparatively. Maybe there's a difference in composition, I haven't checked, but I feel like activating tube paints is easier. So these are my tube paints that I use. These are all student grade. These are also Winsor & Newton. But when I just spray a little bit on them, they get activated and I get a lot of rich pigment on my brush instantly. So that kind of helps as well to get that professional look to your art. So even if you are starting out with pans, that's perfectly fine. They are cheaper, they are easy to move around with and things like that, especially if you don't have a dedicated space to paint yet. Pans would work fine, but if you want to see progress and go to the next level, I would highly recommend shifting into tube paints. And I have 2 other videos in which I talk about paints. I talk about using ChatGPT to find pigments that work for you. If you're moving from pans to tube paints, you can use that as guidance. And I also have a video on understanding the paint properties. So if you're interested in moving from pans and you want to get into a little bit more professional kind of look, I feel tube paints are much better. You will see a lot of artists also recommend using tube paints. So that's one of my recommendations to see progress. Now the other tip that I have is obviously brushes. And please don't buy so many different brushes from so many different brands. You don't really need them. Pick one brand that you like, pick a few brushes from that brand, something on a larger side, medium and small, and some detailing brushes. That works perfectly for me. I only use round brushes. I never use flat brushes. I only use one detailing brush and I don't have like a set of different detailing brushes. So eventually my brush actually set is of only 4 to 5 brushes that I use a lot. Of course, you know that I also sell these brushes on my website and those are the only ones that I use now. I don't need any other brushes, but I have wasted money on so many brushes. Let me show you all the brushes that I have. So I have these brushes, and I have all these brushes, and I have many more brushes there. So yeah, you don't need so many brushes, honestly. You can just do with a few brushes. Pick a brand that you like and work with them, and that should be fine. Most of the good brands are good for you. The brushes that I have on my website are very specific to my type of art, so I would recommend them if you want to draw florals, paint florals, sorry. But otherwise, any good brand would be good for you. So one of my recommendations is, if you want to get started, you can and see if watercolors is really for you. You can just pick any set which is affordable for you, as a student level set for you. But if you want to see progress and you start enjoying this medium of creativity, then invest in a brand that you like and just a few brushes. You will know what kind of brushes you like, and invest in some good artist grade brushes. Now, next tip is probably a bit something that I was intimidated with. So I initially started painting a lot of loose florals. Let me just show you the kind of stuff that I painted. And I watched a lot of tutorials to paint these. So these are all loose things. Of course, these are tutorials, and I never drew any of these flowers. I preferred painting loose style because I was so scared of drawing. And this is a good style of painting. I mean, if you're into loose florals, then this is a great style of painting. This is also not drawn. Actually, I try to paint a bird without drawing. And yeah, some of these flowers. So these are all my beginner stage. I can have a separate video talking about all of my artwork and what I would do differently. But when I got over that fear of drawing, I started seeing a different style of art that I could paint. I wasn't even aware that I was capable of painting that style of art, and I feel that is the one that kind of prevented me from going to the next step. Maybe drawing is not your type of art, that's perfectly fine. If you're really into loose florals, you can continue that, but give it a shot. Give it a shot, try drawing and see if that kind of unlocks another level of creativity or style for you. I personally thought I started finding my style when I got over that fear of drawing, and I actually started drawing, and then I started creating art which was very different. One other theory I have is everybody has a way of interpreting their reference images. So if you just trace that image, like if you trace that photo on a tracing paper and put it on your paper and then paint over it, I feel it loses some personality because you have traced it literally from the photo to your paper. And instead, if you try to draw it, it gives your own personality, the way your eye has perceived that flower, the way you have seen it. I feel like it gives a little bit more personality because you interpret the flower the way you have seen it. Also, there might be some things which you wouldn't even want to paint in a flower, some detailings that you want to skip, and that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine, and that's your type of painting. That's what gives your personality to that art. So my recommendation is try drawing. Don't trace it, try drawing on your own, and it is definitely less frustrating as well, and a quicker process than trying to trace your reference images, because you'll have to print the reference image, you'll have to trace it, then transfer it on your paper. I feel that kind of adds an extra step and kind of sometimes prevents people from actually going to the next level, and they'll continue to paint loose florals, which as I have said many times is perfectly fine if that's the kind of art you want to paint. But I felt that personally I saw a lot of progress or a different style emerge when I started drawing. So that's another tip for you: start drawing. And lastly, what I have to add is stop taking tutorials. I know it might be really strange coming from a teacher. I would recommend taking tutorials initially. Pick your favorite teachers, pick the favorite type of art that you have, and if they are teaching, that's even better. Get into their classes, understand their method of painting. I feel every teacher has a different way of painting. I have my own way of painting because I'm self-taught, but that's my style of painting. And take as many tutorials from different teachers, see the kind of style that you like and what is emerging in your own personality as well. But at certain point, give yourself some time. Say like maybe 6 months I'm going to take tutorials and learn, but after 6 months I'm going to stop them and I'm going to try and paint on my own. So I started seeing progress only when I gave that time to myself to start painting on my own. I stopped taking tutorials and I looked at reference images and I tried to draw them on my own, paint them on my own the way I had noticed it. Of course, my initial paintings were not great, but the more I kept at it, the more progress I saw. And I always do go back to tutorials once in a while. Even now, sometimes I don't feel like, painting something from a reference image, and I just want to follow someone's style that I like, and I try and find some tutorials to unblock that creativity. I've talked about this in my other video, unblock your creativity. That's one of the ways to unblock it as well, to take tutorials. But to see progress, I highly recommend to give yourself some time after say 6 months of tutorials to try and do your artwork on your own. So these were my top 5 tips for anybody who's starting watercolors in 2026 and wants to see progress quickly without frustration. I hope you like the video, and do like, share, comment, and I'll see you next time.